For those of you joining over on YouTube, getting ready to go live again on TikTok. Been having trouble coming up with videos the last couple days. Not a lot going on in the news, so I thought I'd go live and we'll go from there. Alright. Going live over here on the TikTok. Alright, we are live, going to be talking news, politics, upcoming Trump administration, what we can expect, what we can look at going forward. So thanks for joining. It just went live. Going to be talking news, politics, events of the day. Going to be talking about potentially what happens going forward. Some of Donald Trump's worst picks are not going to be confirmed by the Senate. Just ain't gonna happen. They just won't. They won't confirm some of them. RFK Jr. doesn't get past the Senate. Matt Gaetz doesn't get past the Senate. Not gonna happen. Because these senators got to get reelected. They prefer power over anything else, and they know if they're too crazy on their picks, they're not going to get reelected in 2 years. We have midterms in 2 years. They need to get reelected. So, like 30 senators have already said Matt Gaetz not going to happen. He's dead in the water. RFK Jr., same thing. Probably not going to get confirmed by the Senate. I know Donald Trump wants to do recess appointments to get around the Senate, and that's the point. He knows they won't promote some of his picks, and he's going to need to get around it. So he wants the Senate to recess. Problem is they haven't gone on recess since 2014. They just don't. They don't want to give that kind of power back to the president, because Congress has, or the Senate has, the authority to approve nominations, and if they allow recess appointments, that power goes back to the president, at least until the end of their term. So, and I can tell everything I need to know, since I don't have a moderator. Take care of it myself. No, Senate just doesn't want to give that power back to the president. They don't want to go on recess. They haven't since 2014, since Barack Obama was president. And they're not going to go on recess. Now, some people seem to think that, that it's going to happen, that they're going to somehow make the Senate go on recess. That can get filibustered, and Democrats aren't going to allow a recess. But beyond that, I don't think the Senate Republicans are going to want a recess. They just won't. They won't do that. They will end up trying to keep the Senate open. They'll keep doing the pro forma sessions that they've done for 12 years, which is every 3 days somebody gavels in, one of the senators stay behind and goes, well, I assume everybody's here, and as long as everybody's here, does anybody object to us adjourning for 3 days? And that's what they do. I know they've taken the Senate and the House, but doesn't mean that they're going to get away with everything. Senate Republicans, congressional Republicans know they have to get reelected. And the House is going to have such a thin margin of victory for the Republicans, they're not going to be able to get much done. They couldn't get anything passed this time. The red states have another election coming up for the House and the Senate. Oh, yeah, there's going to be special elections coming up for certain seats. The ones that have gotten pulled out of Congress for potentially Donald Trump's cabinet. But those special elections, that could potentially flip the control of the House. Mississippi, Texas, all the southern states have another election for the House and the Senate. I don't know what you're talking about then. I thought you were talking about the special election for the that That's 2 years away. Oh, you're talking the midterms. Okay. Um, no, midterm elections would be 2 years from now, middle of the presidential term. That's what when they talk midterms, that's what they're talking about. The congressional only election that happens in the middle of a presidential term, which would this case would be 2026. Now you're talking about the start of the new Congress. New Congress starts January 3rd. New Congress starts January 3rd. Um, and that will be with those people that won election in November. Handling my own moderation. Um, but no, congressional Republicans, congressional politicians know they've got to get reelected in November of 2026, and they're not going to allow some of the crazier stuff that Donald Trump wants to get done. It's just not going to happen. Some of the Senate picks or the cabinet picks, they're not going to get confirmed by the Senate. House isn't going to pass a bunch of the stuff because they don't have the margins. They can only afford to lose a few members of the House and still pass anything. They just don't have the votes to do this. Bobo123 says plus Trump is incompetent. Exactly. They don't need him anymore. So that they're going to look at it and say, hey, this is stupid. We're not doing it. Handling my own moderation. And those that voted for Trump are going to get what they voted for. They will get the things they voted for. And we're already seeing a lot of people on here talking about how they have conversations with people who voted for Trump and say just that. And Trump supporters get mad because they know some of the stuff they voted for is not good for everybody. What are they going to get? They are going to get a worse economy than what we currently have. Prices are going to skyrocket. And, they're going to sit, and the stock market's going to crash. That's what's going to happen. You take 20 million people out of the labor force that do a lot of the work nobody wants to do for the wages they're getting paid. Those jobs don't get done. Crops don't get picked. Slaughterhouses don't have work. And food's going to go up in cost. Stock market's going up right now because none of the policies are in effect yet. When those tariffs hit, people aren't going to be able to afford it. And it is going to be bad once those tariffs hit. Yeah, if you have the option to pull your money out, might not be a bad idea. James, no, Matt Gaetz will not get his nomination. 30 plus Republican senators have already said Absolutely not. There's no way. I don't see any Democrats voting for Matt Gaetz. He's not going to get his nomination. I mean, he may get nominated, but he won't get approved. Not happening. Um, yeah, it's just not like some of these nominations will not happen because Senate Republicans know because we're just gonna have to get through it. It is gonna be bad, but remember, it's not gonna be as bad as what we think. First of all, they didn't get 60 seats in the Senate; they have 54, and if they pull like Marco Rubio out of Florida, etc., now they have 53. Um, so they're not going to be able to pass a bunch through the Senate. They're going to have a thin margin in the House. Not going to be able to pass much. Um, and it's just not going to happen. They're not going to be able to pass as much as they want. They say Trump can get Gaetz in on his own. That is only if the Senate actually goes on a recess, which they have not gone on recess since 2014 under Obama. What they do, in order to go on a recess, the House and the Senate have to agree to go on a recess, and while they're gone, the president can appoint whoever he wants to any position that would normally require a Senate confirmation, and then the Senate has until the end of the end of this Congress. So for this would be the Congress would go until January 3rd of 2027 to pass it. They would have until January 3rd to approve that pick. If they come back and say no, he's out of a job. Problem is, Congress hasn't gone on recess since 2014 because they don't want to give the power up to the president to appoint anybody. The Senate instead does these pro forma sessions. They say every 3 days, one of the senators comes in, says, "We assume everybody's here. Okay, we're no one objects. We're going home for 3 days," and that's what they do. They keep the Senate in session so they don't give that power to the president. It's all a matter of they want this president, and the reason being they have to get reelected in 2 years. James T asks, "Do you think House Speaker Mike Johnson will keep his job?" Maybe. They they ended up changing the rules for the motion to vacate, um, and that went from one vote to nine. It's still not a big change. Um, they have uh, they can still vacate the job. Johnson can't tell the Senate what to do, though. That's the thing. Johnson can say, "Hey, we're going to try to adjourn the House." If the Senate doesn't agree, maybe, but that can get filibustered. And there is a line in the Constitution that does say um, that if both houses don't agree to the time of adjournment, the president can adjourn them until the time that they deem necessary to bring them back. However, that has never been done in the history of our nation, and um, they couldn't. It would get challenged in court the minute the president tried to say, "Well, I'm adjourning Congress because you guys don't agree." Democratic senators sue and goes to the courts to get tested because it's never been done, even though it's in the Constitution, and the wording is a little vague because it was written in 1787. Artie asks, is there any good news? Oh, yeah, there's plenty of good news. The good news is Republicans have a very slim majority in the House. They can't get anything done. They can't lose hardly anybody. Well, if you want me to shut up, I'll make it simple for you. I'll block you. There. Then you don't have to deal with me. But no, the Republicans have a slim majority in the House. They're not going to be able to pass the worst of it because they can't lose hardly anybody out of their own coalition. No Democrat's going to support their stuff, especially the worst of it. And the senators, a lot of it can get filibustered because they don't have 60 votes. Democrats are going to use that filibuster as much as Republicans did this last 4 years, and it's going to grind to a halt. For some of the rest of it, it's going to take a constitutional amendment. Things like allowing Donald Trump to run again, not going to happen. He is ineligible to run again. It would take a constitutional amendment to run unless they tried to do something and say, well, it must be it meant 2 consecutive terms when the wording is just not there in the amendment. And that would go to court, and there's no way the Supreme Court could, but even this Supreme Court would look at the wording and go, yeah, we can't do that. So there's some good news. It's going to be a shit show. It's not going to be pretty, but we can survive. We can get through it. People's Purpose says Trump is going to play a lot of golf. Don't think he really wanted the job. He says White House is ghetto. Exactly. I've been saying I don't think he actually wanted to win as much as he wanted to run. So, if he wanted to run, all he wanted to run is what I think, is that he wanted to be the nominee. He wanted to be the nominee. He didn't want to be president, but he wanted to use being the nominee and running for president to keep himself out of legal trouble. He happened to somehow fall into the presidency a second time. He didn't want it, I don't think. He wanted to run, he wanted the donations, he wanted all of that, and he wanted the protections of being a candidate, keeping him out of prison and stuff, but he didn't want the actual job. No, he won't have the mental capacity in 4 years to run. Don't know where you heard that. They can't do that. They can't cancel a presidential election. You guys make it. They make it easy. You can't cancel an election. If she said it, that's news to me. I haven't seen anything on it. But there's no way. James is asking, do you think there was any cheating or any illegal voting for Trump to win all 7 swing states? From what I've seen, no. The numbers I'm seeing, and some people have broken down a couple of states. I have not looked into every state. I keep meaning to, just never seem to have the time. The numbers pan out to about what Joe Biden got in 2020. When you look at the down ballot races, those numbers seem to pan out. It's just they didn't end up voting for Kamala Harris. And there's a lot of reasons as to why that happened. They chose not to vote for Kamala Harris, but voted blue down ballot all the way. And a lot of people did. They're still counting ballots, but there's not going to be enough left, I don't think, to even give her the popular vote. But they chose not to vote for Kamala Harris, and that's the thing. They chose not to, and there's numerous reasons as to why. Is it because of how Joe Biden was treated? Possibly. I think that's part of it. Is it because she got the nomination, you know, 10 days before they had to have somebody in, with filing deadlines in a couple of the states that weren't going to grant extensions? Maybe. Was it the two wars? Maybe. Was it the everyday, not the overall economy, but the everyday economy? I think that was part of it too. People were looking at the overall economy numbers, those were being good, but your everyday economy still sucked. James, I don't think it was anything about her being happy and giddy. That's just her personality, and I think a lot of people liked that. Um, I think there's just a lot of other factors. She was tied to the Biden administration, and she had to take the wins with the losses, um, with that, and tied there. Um, what else? And just there was just a lot of things that went into this. She ran a great campaign given what she was given. She only had 100 days roughly to do anything. And I do wonder, and I've asked this question, would some of the people who didn't vote for her have still not voted for her if Joe Biden had died instead of just saying, I'm not running? If that had happened and she became president on that day, um, would that have changed things? Maybe. All metrics said she should have won. She had $1 billion, didn't run a flawless campaign. I wouldn't say it was flawless. She ran a great campaign. But that's something else. Did she spend too much time, um, ending up, running with people like Liz Cheney and shifting farther to the right? You know, yeah. She only had 100 days. She ran a great campaign in that 100 days. The problem is there were just a lot of things. But did they shift too far to the right to try to uh, reel in disenfranchised Trump voters, trying to get every vote they could? Should they have gone farther left? And I think maybe they should have. I mean, I'm not saying she ran a bad campaign, but clearly something didn't work right because she should have won. She had policies and actual articulated policies, not bumper stickers, which is what Donald Trump runs on. He runs on stuff like drill baby drill, which is nonsensical, doesn't tell you anything about what he's going to do. And then when like the head of ExxonMobil comes out and says, "We don't have the capacity to, even if we drill more, to refine more." Well, it says Kamala shouldn't have paraded this training around. Many people who voted Trump are sick of wars. Yeah, between Liz Cheney being a war hawk and especially with her dad, and then just you add in all of it, you have she's very far right, Getting the endorsement was great. Doing a couple of appearances, okay. But I think they went too far right, trying to grab in all of those disenfranchised Trump voters that didn't want to vote for Trump, and instead they had a whole bunch of people on the left that said, "Okay, we're not voting for Kamala because uh, you know, she's too far right. She's got Liz Cheney, things like that." The endorsement was great, but they latched onto it too much, I think. I did the Rational Boomer podcast a couple days ago. And I'm sure some of you who know me know I'm routinely on that podcast. And we were talking about the idea after this, Democrats almost need to come up with somebody that has a transformative policy agenda similar to Roosevelt and his Great New Deal, or his New Deal. Something that big, I think, would actually, especially if it ends up being as bad as what the next 4 years could be. They're going to need to do something big. And that's the thing. They're going to have to do something big, something as big or bigger than the New Deal. I mean, we're going to have to restructure some of the stuff that Donald Trump ruins in the next 4 years. James T says, do you think Trump will still get all guilty, imprisoned J6 criminals released? No. I don't think he will. I think he has no intention of pardoning them. They were a prop. He used them as a talking point. If he was going to pardon them, if he was going to get them released or anything, he would have done that in the last 14 days of his term. But they failed him. They didn't accomplish what he wanted them to do. He's got no reason to do anything for them. But then he turned around and he used them again as a talking point in this election. I don't think he does anything with them. In fact, I don't think he will stop Jack Smith's prosecution of himself and maybe any of the sitting politicians, but any of the DOJ going after the on the ground people. Wouldn't surprise me if that continues and those cases move forward even after Trump's inaugurated and nothing happens there, because he doesn't need them anymore. They failed him. The ones that got caught, and they didn't do what he wanted them to do on January 6th. Not like they could have actually succeeded anyway. The next 4 years, we're gonna be in for some rough times, but I think Democrats are gonna have to take the time, get a candidate or two for the primary, come up with some good policies, and go forward. So, no, Donald Trump has no plan, I don't think, to pardon the J6 rioters. They're going to be doing he's going to be busy doing other things, mostly golfing. He's not going to care enough to do anything with them. Steve and I already blocked him. You're not going to get through to the people like that anyway. They they don't want to acknowledge that those things were going on, but then they'll blame Joe Biden uh, for the withdrawal of Afghanistan, and but then say, well, Afghanistan wasn't going on under Trump. So, James T, do you think Hakeem Jeffries could be in the running for president? Maybe. Uh, he could potentially. Hakeem could be in the running. I would have liked to seen what he can do as speaker, and we may still get that in this upcoming term because there's going to be a couple of special elections to replace the sitting members of Congress that get pulled out to Trump's cabinet, and those sitting members of those seats could flip. I mean, I know they're going to be in some safe red districts, but special elections get weird because they're not the normal time of the year, things like that, and you never know what's going to happen in a special election. Eugene Rawlis says, is Trump's concepts of a plan going to replace Medicare and Medicaid? I don't know. You know, he's had 8 years to come up with a health care plan, and he still hasn't gotten one. He's got concepts of a plan. And they say it's not a cult. Um, he's got concepts of a plan, but that's it. I really think that this is going to be the last gasp for MAGA. After this, their movement's going to die out. They're not going to be able to survive these 4 years. Where do I get 8 years? He had his 4 years of his term, and he's been planning to run for 4 more. So, what, you know, that's 8. It's been 8 years since he was elected the first time, and he still doesn't have a health care plan. He's only got concepts of a plan, but supposedly he had a plan during his first term. Where'd that plan go? I don't think JD has got the charisma to captivate the MAGA audience like Donald Trump. Should have. What do you mean? Why would he need a health care plan? He said for the 4 years he was president the first time that he had a health care plan and he was going to replace the Affordable Care Act. Never happened. He never had a plan. Said he had a plan. Never had a plan. Couldn't repeal Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. And no, he doesn't have a plan. The only sort of a plan was something that J.D. Vance threw out there, which would take us back. J.D. Vance had mentioned in one of his speeches talking about the health care plan that they want to go back to basically how it was before, where you can get kicked off your insurance for pre-existing conditions. And they want to pool all the really healthy people together and save them money, and then pool all the really unhealthy people together and make them pay through the nose. Why would he need a health care plan? Thought Obamacare was the greatest thing since sliced bread. It is pretty good. Problem is, Donald Trump has been wanting to repeal it since he was in office the first time, and he keeps saying he's going to have a plan. And just want to know what that plan is. James says, do you think at some point Trump and Musk will have a falling out? Yeah, they will. Their two personalities will not mesh at all. And at some point, Elon Musk is going to overstep and Donald Trump's going to be done with him. They won't. Elon will be out of the White House, especially if Donald Trump can't get Congress to approve his Department of Government Efficiency. They're not going to be able to pass that through Congress. That ain't going to happen. And he can't just create it without Congress because that takes money. You know, they have to appropriate the money through Congress. And because of the Supreme Court getting rid of the Chevron decision, now they have to be very specific about what the powers are of any new cabinet position, any new department. Because if they're not, and it's vague, the decision about where those gaps and what those gaps mean can be decided by courts now and not by the department like it was under the Chevron deference, because the Supreme Court got rid of that. So Congress isn't going to be putting out this Department of Government Efficiency. That ain't going to happen. They're not going to do it. And besides, talk about Department of Government Efficiency. How efficient is it if you need two chairs? If you need two people at the top, not very efficient, is it? So they're going to be outside advisors at best, and none of the departments are really going to have to listen to him. And when he's not getting his way and he doesn't have the power and authority that he thought he was going to have, he'll start causing problems. Musk will, and he'll butt heads with Donald Trump because they both like the limelight. They both like being big shots, and they'll get into it, and Musk will be gone. Do you think Marjorie Taylor Greene will also get nominated for something by Trump? No. I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene will ever get nominated. I thought I read something somewhere where they were talking to somebody in the transition team, and Trump has said no, she doesn't get nominated for anything. I just don't remember where I read that. She thinks she should get nominated to something, but again, she'd have to get through the Senate confirmation process, and the senators work with her. They know who she is. They know what she's about. Do you think they would get her through? She's in the same boat as Matt Gaetz. Laura says Musk is going to want to return in his investment. Yeah, exactly. He's going to want something in return, and that they're not going to be able to make it happen. And that's where they have the falling out over, probably. No, Trump will be gone. They don't need Trump anymore. They can vote him out. Vance is their hand. Could be. They could always try to 25th Amendment Donald Trump. That could be a real thing. How many of these guys do you think they will get in? Hard to say. Out of the picks so far, I would say um, RFK Jr. probably doesn't make it. Hegseth, the Fox News host as Department of Defense, not going to make it. And Matt Gaetz probably won't make it. Karen from Smart, recess appointments. Recess appointments won't be a thing. Congress has not gone on recess since 2014 with Barack Obama as president. They will keep doing the pro forma sessions every 3 days, where that one of the senators just holds a fake session, basically, where they show up, say, we assume everybody's here. Okay, we're going home for 3 days. In and out in 5 minutes. They're going to keep doing that to avoid going on recess, to keep Donald Trump from doing that, because they don't want to cede that power over to the president. Will the Pentagon stay loyal to the Constitution? I think so. They've already said they plan to follow out any lawful order. Phyllis says these guys aren't being put in there to run anything. They're there to destroy them. Exactly. And as I've said a couple times the last week and a half, politicians like power, and they will try to keep power, and they won't cede it to the president. So these ones that are in there to destroy these things, they're not going to allow them in, because they want to protect their own power, and they also want to make sure that they can get reelected. Mitchell says, when is the next opportunity for the Senate to flip? Possibly 2026, midterms. There's going to be more seats for Democrats to potentially pick up. This was a tough fight in this last election for Democrats. We knew going into the race it was going to be tough for Democrats to keep the Senate. There were 34 seats up for grabs. 9 were held by Republicans. It was a tough math. It's going to be more 50-50-ish, if not more Republicans than Democrats up for re-election in the 2026 midterms. And if things are as shitty as they could be, historically, the non-White House party gains large swaths of seats in the midterms. So there's a good chance both chambers of Congress flip in the midterms again. And then Donald Trump can't get anything done. Musk is just a naturalized citizen and can be deported. Yes, he can. He can also be denaturalized. We know for a fact that he's talked about overstaying a student visa and actually making money on a student visa, I believe it was, which is a crime. And because that happened, they could charge him, and in that process, he could be stripped of his citizenship and kicked out of the country. It is entirely possible. As far as like other people being denaturalized, you may see a few here and there, but they're not going to Congress won't pass anything sweeping to denaturalize a bunch of people. That won't go through because they can't go back to their constituents and get reelected if they do. And as far as getting rid of birthright citizenship, that would take an amendment, and that ain't going to happen. The only thing they could hope for is potentially a Supreme Court case where they look at the previous ruling, and I don't remember what the name of that case was, where they ruled the 14th Amendment's wording that says any person born in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction means something other than what it has meant since the last ruling on it. And that was that if you are born here and aren't born to somebody like with diplomatic immunity, things like that, you are subject to its jurisdiction because you can be arrested, you can be charged with crimes, you can be taxed, things like that. That makes you subject to its jurisdiction. You have You don't have an immunity. So, unless they go back to the Supreme Court and try to get that changed or pass an amendment, birthright citizenship isn't going away. And Donald Trump, despite what he says he thinks he can do, is not going to be able to just write an executive order that changes how birthright citizenship works. The minute he tries it, it will get challenged in court and tossed out. Well, your name says it all because, yep, you got blocked. Phyllis asks, honestly, don't you think there's a possibility? I'm going to say it like this. I'm not going to say it's outside of the realm of possibility, but I've seen nothing data wise and evidence based that shows that could have happened. That's the rub. We can sit all day long and say it's going to happen or it could have happened, but there's nothing to back it. There's nothing saying it did happen. Um, it's it looks weird. I didn't want to accept the results and say, hey, Kamala lost because I couldn't believe that many people voted for Trump that instead of Kamala Harris. Thing is, his numbers are about where they were um, 4 years ago. Mitchell says, does the Secretary of Defense typically serve in the military? Yes. A lot of times it's 3 and 4 star generals, sometimes 5 star, but we haven't had a 5 star since Patton. Was it Patton or MacArthur? One of the two. As far as was there a way they could find out, I'm sure there are some people that are looking into it. If there is anything, we'll find out when they make it public. Scott asks, what was Trump's little secret? I don't think he had one. I don't think he actually had anything. I think he was hoping that they could do something similar to January 6th in the House. And I think it was just um, a, a nothing thing. Said if Trump was elected, there would be no elections. Uh, he did kind of say that, but I think he just meant you wouldn't have to vote for him because he wouldn't be able to run again. And he doesn't care about people voting after if he's not involved. Rumsfeld was a civilian. There are some civilians that do have it, but when they have military experience, typically they're higher up. Um, I, I don't know as far as if there's ever been. I am not familiar with CO2 drilling in Louisiana. Yeah, we do have to interpret everything Trump says. That's the thing. I've never known anybody who can sit there and say, his voters all say, "I like it because he says what he means and he speaks it like it is and things like that." And then they have to clarify what he meant all the time. They have to apologize for what he said and make it, well, he really meant this, or he was talking about that, or it was a joke, or it was this, or it was that. No, he says what he says. It's whatever his train of thought is in the moment, and his train of thought isn't even on a track at this point. Polymer CEO electronic devices have been seized. Tabulated ballots. Um, I thought wasn't that the group that was allowing people to bet on the election outside of the U.S.? I thought that's what they were doing. Trump not going to the White House. I don't know if he, as of right now, it looks like he is. Gillian says, my mother told me when a man tells you who he is, believe him exactly. Jeff says, Robert McNamara was a civilian and longest serving civilian DOD. Could be. I believe you. I'm not familiar. I don't have all of them memorized. Let's see. Phyllis says he had to get elected to keep from going to jail. Yeah. Deegan asks, are there any official recounts going on? There are some. I know some Senate seats, some House seats are being recounted because they're extremely thin margins in some cases, less than like half a percentage point. And those are going on. I don't know if there's any states being recounted for Kamala Harris as a state on the whole. Richard Hamilton says 14th Amendment Section 3. Could be. Could be used. I just don't know if they will. Don't know about the satellite blowing up. Let's see. James asks, do I think Trump will nominate Steve Bannon? Maybe. Haven't heard who he's picking for press secretary. Wouldn't surprise me if he does something like that for Bannon. If it would be press secretary or head of communications, something like that. But Bannon may not even be available because he's got a New York State criminal trial in December that starts because he screwed people out of money to fund the wall. He was running a scam, getting people to donate money to him that was supposedly going to go help build that border wall that Trump wanted, that Mexico was supposedly going to pay for. And Steve Bannon got a lot of gullible Trump supporters to send him money and defrauded them. And he's going to be facing New York State criminal charges over that. And you can't pardon state crimes, so Trump can't pardon him. He could be in prison before January 20th, depending on how long the trial takes and what date it starts. So he may be a non-factor. Don't believe Trump's clown show can govern? No, he can't. Deegan, yes, I do. She will sign the certificate, unless there is something that absolutely happens to prove otherwise. She will sign it because that's the type of person she is, and she doesn't really have any other choice. That is her, her job that day. Basically, is to count the votes and say, these are the results. It's amazing. Their side won, and they are the worst as far as being sore winners. They rub it in your face whenever they win, but they are also very sore losers. Richard says they're working, man. They're investigating this. I haven't seen anything confirming that they are or they are not. So I would assume that if they are working on it and as soon as something comes out, we'll talk about it. But they better be working quickly. They're up against deadlines. Eugene says, why is Trump not signing the ethics agreement? Because he doesn't care. He doesn't plan on following it. The ethics agreement is about the handling of classified information, and he wants to do what he did before, and he wants to have them all stashed at Mar-a-Lago. Um, they're going to turn up missing again, and he wants to do what he wants with them. Remember, uh, he used to say those are my boxes. I get to do with them. Return my property. So he's not. He doesn't care about signing the ethics agreement. Mr. Mitchell says, "What do you think happens to MAGA if uh, Trump fades?" Uh, they go away. MAGA is going to become irrelevant. Um, they're Teddy Pushkin says, "Why can't Biden pack the Supreme Court before handing over to the felon?" Two reasons. One, can't get it through the House of Representatives, and they're just not going to be able to. It's not going to happen. Not with Republicans in control of the House. Um, Two, uh, um, they just don't have time. They don't have time to pack the court now. Yeah, it is a lifetime appointment for the Supreme Court. What they're talking about is adding more justices to the Supreme Court. Um, and the other half of it is with the incoming Trump administration having all three branches, it would be just as easy for them to add just as many justices. It's just not going to happen. Jeff says, "Do you think they should pack it?" Go back and forth on it. Um, we have 13 appellate divisions. When we went to 9 justices, the logic for 9 was one for each circuit appellate court. By that logic, they should go to 13. Um, some people have suggested going to differing term, like an 18-year term limit. Each one gets appointed every 2 years, something like that. There's all kinds of ways they could fix the Supreme Court. The lifetime appointments thing was never meant to be what we've gotten now, where it's 30, 40, 50 years on the bench. It was meant to be, you know, a job that you did until you retired, not until you died in office. And, they always expected people would just be constantly, they'd do it for a while, get bored of it, and retire. They didn't want to have 30, 40, 50-year justices. So I don't know how they fix it. Um, Packing the court's always an interesting idea, and it sounds great for the people in power, but I just don't see it happening. Joe Biden isn't the type of person to pack the court, and it's very politically divisive. Um, like I said, one of the things and why people don't like doing it is you have the counter argument of, well, if we pack it this time, next time they're in power, they're just going to add even more. Next thing you know, you got 100 justices. It becomes a thing. There's a lot that goes into that idea. Um, let's see. Sitting at about an hour, doing good so far. Uh, but no, we're talking news politics for those of you jumping in. Kind of talk about what the next couple of years are going to look like, what is going to pass, what's not going to pass. Um, And some of the worst of it, like I said, is just not going to pass. They're not going to be able to get it through Congress. They're definitely not going to get any constitutional amendments passed. And even if they could somehow get them through Congress, odds of them 38 states ratifying it in any short length of time, not going to happen. It's a long process. Changing the Constitution was always meant to be a long process. Jeff says 2 of the first 5 justices served 30 years. Yeah, I mean, but I still don't think they ever wanted it to be like where everybody died in office. Mr. Mitchell says, I don't think Trump fumbles around for 2 years making a mess. Oh yeah, you think he'll I don't know that he makes it all through all 4 years. James T says, aren't 2 of Trump's Supreme Court judges supposed to retire? That was the talk, but it was either Alito or Thomas have said that they're not retiring yet. They have no plans on it. There are people worried about it, but it sounds like they're not going anywhere. Dev asks, can they eliminate Social Security? They could, but that would take Congress. And there's no way with as tight of margins as they have in both houses of Congress that it gets through. That would get filibustered by the Democrats. They won't be able to get around the 60 vote threshold. And the House, with them only having a few seat majority, they can only lose a couple Republicans, and there's at least a couple that know they can't go back to their constituents and say, hey, we look at this great thing we did. We got rid of your Social Security. People would be pissed. Some of them have been talking about it for years, but they also know ultimately they can't talk too loudly about doing it. They can't actually do it because they can't get reelected if they do. And I've talked about it numerous times over my last several lives. Politicians care about one thing more than anything else, and that's their own power. In less than 2 years, there's going to be the midterm elections. 1/3 of the Senate and all of the House of Representatives is up for election again. And those people know if they jettison Social Security, despite what Trump may want, despite what some people may want, they're going to have trouble getting reelected again if they do it. And all they care about is getting reelected. So they're not going to do some of the craziest stuff. They're just not. I mean, I could be wrong, and they could try to do some of this stuff. Mr. Mitchell says, who decides how the U.S. participates in NATO? Some of it is by how the treaty is worded. And as far as them being able to unilaterally withdraw, there was something passed in a defense budget that takes like 2/3 of the Senate in order to withdraw from NATO. So Trump can't just do it. Deegan asks, what do you think of the meeting with Biden? Was it a formality? I think it was a formality. They did it because they have to. No idea who's going to be the nominee in 2028. What's going on with the ethics reform plan for the Supreme Court being enforced? I don't think anything's going to happen until Democrats regain control of at least the House, if not both, the House and the Senate, in the midterms. Going back to the Democratic nominee for 2028, Democrats have a deep bench. They have a lot of people who it could be. And a lot of things can happen between now and 2028. You could have a surprise rising star come out of the midterms. Kamala could try to run again. Tim Walz could, I don't know if he would make an attempt at it. He would be good. Shapiro from Pennsylvania would be a good choice. Newsom in California, another good choice. Democrats have a lot of options. Republicans don't have options in 2028 because they're not Trump. Nobody on the Republican side can capture that base like Donald Trump can. They, believe everything Trump says, even if you can show them mounds of evidence against it, and they still believe it. There's nobody on the Republican side that can do the same thing. I don't think. Maybe in the next 4 years, somebody will uh, come up. Eugene asks, "How often do I podcast?" You mean how often do I go live? Uh, Last couple weeks, I've been doing it a lot more often. I don't really have a plan. If you're referring to my guesting over on the Rational Boomer podcast, I end up over on that podcast about once every couple of weeks. Jeff says JD Vance had the highest approval rating of all the four candidates. I don't believe that for a minute. His approval rating was like at 28% or something like that. You might be right, but Vance is not a good candidate, and I see people uh, copping about him when he's more unpopular than Palin. Yeah, Vance could end up he will get the he'll get the blame when things go bad, especially if he tries to run after Trump. Kind of like how people thought the economy was bad under Biden and blame Kamala. Deegan asks, like Nixon, can Biden resign and let Kamala Harris take over? Yes. There is nothing in the Constitution that would prevent that. At all. Absolutely nothing in the Constitution would prevent Biden from resigning. The thing that will probably stop it is Biden himself. He won't do it. Laura Trump's husband? Is that Don Jr.? Or is she married to Eric? I don't remember which one she's married to. Either way, non-factor. Um, Not as popular. Not doesn't have the image, the built-up image going in. Neither one of them would be able to capture the same thing their father did. Ain't gonna happen. I could be wrong, but I just don't see it. She does run the Republican Party, but only because Donald put the thumb on the scale to get her that position, and he only wanted her in that position to funnel money out of the RNC into his campaign so he could use it to fund his legal bills. That's why I said I don't think he wanted to actually win. He just wanted to run. He wanted the money. He wanted the protection of being a candidate from his legal troubles because he thought that was going to save him. That's why he announced when he did. It wouldn't do any good because Republicans would shoot down everything Kamala did. I mean, she'd only be in office until January 20th anyway. It wouldn't change. I'm going to continue my answer there, Deegan, with what I was saying before. It won't. Nothing changes. Republicans have control of just the House until January 3rd. Both chambers of Congress from January 3rd to January 20th. If Kamala were to become president today, nothing changes. It's still gridlocked. They're not going to do anything. The only thing that happens is she becomes president to become petty. It's kind of a petty thing to do to make all of Trump's 47 merchandise, worthless. And the only other thing it would do is it would get those two things out of the way. We would have a woman and a woman of color as president for even a short period of time. And then we could say it happened and then, hopefully never have to worry about bringing it up ever again that would America ever have a woman or a woman of color as president. I just don't think Joe Biden would do it. Mr. Mitchell says at least we are at the beginning of the end of Trump. Yeah. I mean, he can't run again. He is constitutionally barred from becoming president again. He's joked about running for a third term, but they would have to change the Constitution, and as I've said, they don't have the numbers to do that. And now he is a lame duck, effectively. I mean, he does have midterms to worry about, But after those midterms, especially if he loses Congress, he's going to be a lame duck for 2 years, where he's not going to be able to get anything done. And like I said, most of the egregious stuff that he wants to try, they're not going to be able to get done because, Congress knows they have to be reelected. James asks, do you think Ron DeSantis will try to run for president again? Maybe. A lot of people are seeming to think that, so how it'll work if Marco Rubio becomes Secretary of State, that Senate seat is open. And the governor can appoint anybody he wants. He can appoint anybody he wants, and some people think that DeSantis is going to appoint himself to the Senate seat. Deegan says, what if he declared himself as a dictator? I think if he even tried to do that, especially if he did it early in his own term, his own party will turn against him. When I was last on the Rational Boomer podcast, we talked about this a little bit. It is entirely possible that the Republicans move to impeach and remove Donald Trump before the end of his term. If he starts being too egregious, if he starts being too bad, that they will try to remove him to limit the damage to themselves and the party. They don't need him anymore. He brings nothing to them other than maybe some votes in the midterms. But he can't run again. And, he can't do much for them. So if he goes way too far overboard, they could try to remove him. And if he tries to declare himself a dictator, yeah, they write up articles of impeachment. They convict him in the Senate. He gets removed. J.D. Vance becomes president, but he can destroy them after 2028. Trump could. Problem is, I don't think he'll care at that point. Congress doesn't have an army. No, they don't. But the thing is, if they impeach and convict him in the Senate, the minute that judgment is passed, he is no longer. Once they vote on him to be removed, and once he is removed, he's no longer president. He can tell the army to do whatever he wants. They're not going to do it. J.D. Vance is scarier than Donald Trump. But no matter how bad this administration is, and I think it's going to be horrible, J.D. Vance is going to carry that stink with him if he tries to run in 2028. And I just don't see him getting reelected. Unfortunately, people had a bad memory when it came to how bad the Trump years were. But if he purges the military, puts in all loyalists, yeah, I don't think that'll be a thing. He already cheated when he was on campaign trail. J.D. Vance, I don't think he's got the same aspirations. Not at all. He said, I don't need your votes, got enough already. He said that, and then he went out 2 days later and said, you just need to vote for me. Vote for me. I need your votes. He says whatever pops into his head in the moment, and I think he meant that more as a I'm extremely popular boast than anything. He was bragging. James T says, "Is Hakeem Jeffries keeping his minority position? Maybe." I believe Hakeem Jeffries is staying minority leader. I don't think that's going to change. I don't think Vance is going to try to be a dictator. They don't have the same aspirations. Um, who's going to replace Jeffries? He's staying. What do you mean? I thought I don't know what you're talking about. He's staying where? Oh, Jeffries be the speaker in 2 years? Yeah, he could be. Um, yeah. Well, oh, as minority leader, I don't know who the next. It wouldn't be minority leader. Then it would be majority leader. Because if he's speaker, they would have the majority. And I don't know who the next person would be for the Democrats. Because typically there's the speaker, and then there's also the party leader. I don't know who else is in their leadership roles. Uh, MTG, if she does not get a position, all hell is going to break loose at the Hill. Entirely possible. She's been saying she thinks she deserves one. But again, probably would never get out of the Senate. Senate wouldn't confirm her. Yeah, I hadn't heard RFK's worm that there was going to be any sort of leadership change in the Democratic Party. At least not in the House. I don't know. I thought I saw something about um, them trying to figure out who was going to be minority leader in the Senate. Would Newsom beat Vance? Yeah, I think so. Newsom could beat Vance. Deegan asks, can Trump bypass the Senate and pass all of his nominees confirmed by the House only? No. Short answer, no. Because none of the nominees need the House at all. They have to be approved by the Senate, period. Um, the only way they can bypass the only way they can bypass the Senate is if the Senate goes on recess, and then Trump can say, "I'm appointing this person." Senate confirm him later, and then whenever the Senate comes back, um, the Senate has to still approve that person, and if they say no, then that person's still out of a job. But the House hasn't gone on, or the Senate hasn't gone on recess since 2014. They're not planning to go on recess. Uh, Senate Majority Leader John Thune is not going to allow the Senate to recess. Plus, any attempt to recess the Senate could be filibustered by the Democrats. It ain't going to happen. They'll keep doing their 3 day breaks, and they won't give Trump the ability to appoint anybody through a recess appointment. Can cabinet appointments go through without the Senate? Nope. Again, need Senate confirmation unless they're in recess. Those are all cabinet level positions need Senate approval, and the Senate's not going to recess, so they can't do anything. Approval ratings for both Vance and Trump will plummet in the first month, guaranteed. Especially when once the tariffs start going in if they start doing any sort of mass deportation effort and the price of everything goes up, people are going to freak and they are going to blame the administration. And as far as like these tariffs, worked for a company. RFK RFK's Worm says cabinet level appointments go through in recess. Yeah, but again, Senate has not recessed since 2014. They don't go. They don't go on recess. Even when they're out for 6 weeks, they are never officially on recess. Every 3 days, a senator goes in, gavels in a session, and says, okay, everybody's here, and since everybody's here, if there are no objections, we're going home." And gavels back out. They're in and out in 5 minutes. But what I was saying is, worked for a company. Um, Deegan says, "What do you think about Putin? Putin is thinking about the Trump fiasco right now. Putin's pushing his limits with Trump to see what he can get away with, and so far it looks like a lot. Um, he wants Trump to be loyal to him." RFK's Worm asks, "Is it a simple majority?" No, it is. They need to get past the filibuster. They need supermajority. Do I think the Democrats will come up with a new theme? I don't know. They went too far. I think they did kind of go too far right this last time. They were not running very left ideas. Somebody pointed out not long before I came on this live, I was watching somebody's video. They were talking and showing all of the clips of varying ads. Democrats wearing camo, talking about closing the border, talking about, typical Republican issues. They tried to go right to attract the Republican voters. So I don't know what their new theme is going to be. These tariffs, if they go through, people don't understand how far they are going to raise the cost of everything, because that cost is going to go up at every step of the way. So, simple math, I guess. If it costs $10 at the port now, it'll cost 12. That shipper sends it off to another distributor. Well, now it costs them 12, where they used to charge 12 to send it on to the next spot in the line. Now they're going to charge 14. Now they're charging 14. It's going to go to the next place, and they were usually charging 12. Now they're charging 14, so it's costing them more. Now they're going to charge 16. By the time it gets to the final destination, it's going to be up to 20. And every stop along the way, it's going to get added in more and more money. They say that it's going to protect American manufacturing. Here's the problem. How long is it going to take to build the manufacturing here in the country? That takes years. Years. They're not going to have time to get to build. They're not going to be able to build up anything basically in time to avoid the tariffs. It just won't happen. We'll make a talk about tabulators being hacked. People are suggesting it. I just haven't seen any proof. Anybody coming out with actual proof. If it is, I'd love to see actual hard proof. Dems can't be running toward the right. That's how Kerry lost to Bush. Yeah. That, and as far as Kerry and Bush, I voted for Bush, not Kerry. In part because all I heard out of Kerry was, "I'm not him." I didn't hear too much about any sort of ideas or anything. Deegan asks, do you think, as I do, that Democrats are too weak, passive, coward, and complacent? Uh, Overall, no. It's just, especially with Biden, they were trying to hold on to the old school politics, the way politics used to work. Donald Trump introduced a new element into the game of politics, and Democrats haven't adapted very well. They've tried to adapt, just haven't done a very good job of it. So yeah, let's see what else. There was something I missed. Question is, should we stay dependent on China and others? The problem is, it's not about being dependent on China. Okay, uh, one of the reasons we're dependent on other countries, for example, is the southern hemisphere has the opposite growing cycle as we do. So, for our food supply, for certain things, we have to buy them from other countries that are growing them during times we can't. It's just a thing that we have to do. Um, we also have to, there are things we don't make here. Like we don't grow chocolate here, we don't grow coffee here. We have to bring that stuff in from other countries. And we are such an interconnected economy worldwide that we need to buy stuff from other countries. And not only that, but if we go too far against buying from them, they don't buy from us. And a big chunk of our economy is also based on us selling to foreign countries. Remember back during Trump's first term, I'm an Iowan. I remember this. We had to bail out the farmers. Because of the trade war with China, we couldn't sell our grain to China. They weren't buying it. It was rotting in the fields because they couldn't do anything with it. We make way more than we need here when it comes to the foods we do grow and produce. And we use the worldwide market to sell that and make our citizens money, our farmers money, and grow our economy. If we get into trade wars with every other country, they're not going to want to buy from us. Or they're going to start putting tariffs and things on us, and it's going to become a never-ending cycle. Even Chuck Grassley, the senator from Iowa, who I can't stand, came out on a conference call earlier this week and said to a bunch of Iowa reporters that if we get in a trade war, it's going to be bad for farmers. A trade war is started with tariffs, and then both countries go back and forth. It is not going to be good for the American economy to start doing that. Eugene says Trump had to help the grain farmers because of his tariffs. Exactly. M. Bush, because they won't let the farmers farm. What do you mean by that? What do you mean they won't let the farmers farm? I live in farm country. Everywhere I go, I see fields full of crops during crop season. I mean, they're cleared now because it's November, but you know what I mean. They they grow plenty here in Iowa. Deegan asks, are there really legal grounds to deport naturalized citizens? Yes, but usually it's used in very specific cases um, where, like, somebody egregiously broke the law, especially before they got their citizenship. They can revoke that citizenship and deport them. RFK's Worm asks, what promises do you think Trump will actually act on? Uh, Probably he may try to do the deportation thing, but it will get held up in the courts. Not going to happen. Won't pass through Congress if they try to do it that way. Um, he may try to do the tariffs. Um, I don't know. I don't know how much of his stuff he's actually going to be able to do. He may open up for the drilling, but even the head of ExxonMobil has said drilling more isn't going to do any good for the price of oil. That ain't going to do anything. They can't refine anymore. They don't have the capacity to refine more. Um, Monsanto tells them what seeds they can use, and they're all genetically modified. We've been genetically modifying seeds for centuries, probably millennia. We figure out what grows better. We have figured out how to um, intermix breeds and things like that of seed. We do it with livestock. We've done it with the dog. We know how this works. We have known for millennia. All they do now is they do it scientifically, and they get the exact results they want. That's all. That's all it is. They are getting the exact results they want instead of leaving it up to chance and hoping they get the results they want by doing it the way we had for thousands of years. It's the same thing. Tariffs and deportations are going to be token efforts as billionaire donors won't like it. Yeah. What I think he's going to do with at least some of his big things. I think he's going to just say he did a bunch and not actually do anything. Um, he's going to say, like, he's going to come out and say, we got great things in the works for rounding up all the criminal, illegal immigrants. And then weeks later, he's going to come out and say, see, our efforts worked. We rounded them all up. People are going to look around and go, oh, I don't see any criminal, you know, illegal immigrants. Good job. Because most aren't criminals. And a lot of it is going to be him just gaslighting the American country into believing that he did good things, that he did what he said he was going to do. Same with, like, they'll try to do some sort of a transgender ban in sports. I don't even remember how many student athletes they were talking about nationwide. I want to say it was under 100 nationwide. So they'll put some sort of thing in place banning that. People will look around and go, oh, it's not happening. And another one of the very, very ungracious winners. Lola K says, do I think he'll cut Social Security? No, because that would take Congress. And Congress knows they have to get reelected in order to do anything. They want their own power. If they touch Social Security, as the bulk of Republican voters are baby boomers or older, or even some of them that are Gen X that are getting right on the edge of that retirement Social Security cusp, you touch it, you'd lose them as a voting bloc. RFK Worm, you were saying to somebody who I've already blocked, he did so great on the COVID epidemic. Favorite was when he suggested injecting bleach. Yeah, he tossed out the pandemic playbook that he was left by Obama. Got rid of the pandemic response team that Obama left, and he put in place specifically in case something happened. Donald Trump fired them all, said we don't pay people to sit around, we'll hire people when it comes time. And then he didn't hire anybody when it came time. Deegan asks, do you notice or know that most Americans, black I'm guessing you meant black or whites don't know about civics. Oh yeah, a lot of people have no idea how any of this works. Um, I've noticed that for a long time. They have no idea. Like a lot of people for years, almost every time, if you look at voting history, most of the time they vote top of the ticket, don't vote down ballot at all. They care about who the president is, but they don't even think twice about who's in Congress, knowing that Congress actually has just as much, if not more, power than the president, because all spending comes from Congress. A lot of them don't know about history either. No, they don't. As we've been talking about in some of my last lives, um, looking back at what happened the last time we did major tariffs, it was part of the response to the Great Depression. And it did not help at all. Uh, Marcia asks, "Do I think the Democratic Congress will try to protect us?" Um, if you mean, well, Democrats aren't going to be in control of Congress for the first 2 years of Trump's term. The Democrats in Congress will do what they can. Um, but the thing is, congressional Republicans know they have to go back and get reelected in 2 years. Midterms are coming. If they do too much of the egregious, stupid bullshit, they will never get reelected, and they would hand Democrats Congress in the midterms, and they don't want to do that. Not a chance. So they're going to get some stuff through, but some of the worst of it, Congress is going to fight them on. And that's if they even try to do any of it. Um, Vivek is suggesting cutting Social Security. Yeah, Vivek doesn't actually have a real position in Congress or in the cabinet. The Department of Government Efficiency doesn't actually exist. And that would take Congress to approve creating that department. That just ain't going to happen. Deegan says they don't know the duties of a VP, so they blame everything on Kamala. Yeah, exactly. Vice President has like 4 jobs total, unless they are given specific powers by the president. One, they are to oversee the Senate. They are the president of the Senate, and they run the day-to-day operations of the Senate. 2, they are waiting around to have to fill in the role of president should something happen to the president, or if there were if there is something like a medical issue where the president gets put under anesthesia, they can be in charge while he's recovering. Then it is to tell the Congress that there's an issue with the president and use the 25th Amendment if they feel that is necessary. And that's basically it. Marcia asks, do I think we will be okay? Because she's worried. I think we'll be okay. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a struggle. Things are not going to get better as quickly as they would have if Kamala got elected. But I also, looking at it now logically, they're not going to be able to do nearly as much bad stuff as what we were afraid of. RFK's Worm asks, how much do you think John Thune is going to buck Trump? Quite a bit. He's old school Republican. He's already said the Senate's not going to go on recess. He's not going to even bring that up for a thing. So if they don't bring it up for a vote, Senate never goes on a recess. No recess appointments. They're gonna be already worried about doing things as far as getting reelected, and John Thune is worried about getting congressional Republicans, Senate Republicans reelected. They are going to be looking out for their own best interests. After Inauguration Day, now that the election is over, they don't need Donald Trump. Marcia says, you drop politics news on mainstream, grieving so much. Mainstream media fucked us over in this election. They wanted us to believe it was a horse race from day one. If they would have covered Donald Trump with as much vigor as they covered things like how bad Joe Biden was doing, he had one bad debate and they covered him for 3 weeks. The top headline on MSNBC and CNN was, is Joe Biden stepping aside? Is he going to run? He'd come out and say, I'm not going anywhere. 5 minutes later, they'd say, well, Joe Biden said he's not going anywhere, but is he dropping out of the race? And they kept harping on it because they wanted it to be a horse race between those two, and they kept dragging Joe Biden down. And then when Kamala Harris came up, they gave her the same treatment. They drug her down, and they would point out some of the bad things Donald Trump was saying, but they didn't cover him nearly as bad as they should. Like, they should have shown all of the bad things that Donald Trump was doing in all of his rallies, etc., and they weren't talking about it. Biden was a great president. He was a great president. Now, some argument could be made, should Joe Biden have stepped aside earlier? Maybe. And it was pointed out to me in the comment section of another video that I did. When Joe Biden announced he was running again for re-election, it was right after midterms when Donald Trump announced he was running. And one of the things is, I said in that video, well, maybe Joe Biden should have stepped aside then because they lost the House. But then they went ahead and this commenter pointed out, we should have lost the House by 40, 50 seats. We only lost it by 5. He had a great midterm. So you can see why he wanted to stay in. RFK's Worm says, it was a shock for me to see majority leader and gave me hope. But they are brave with a secret vote. Well, they did that to defy Trump. Trump wanted Rick Scott to get it. They wanted it an open vote so he could strong arm and lay the thumb on the scale of who he doesn't know who voted how, unless they've come out and admitted it. Marcia says they didn't know. We all thought she was going to win. They claim that. If they would have covered it, would be if they would have covered it with as much hope as if they would have covered her the way the people were talking about it and not the way they wanted to, they would have had even probably better ratings, and it would have been an easy Kamala victory. Do I think Trump will be going back to the White House with all these hang-ups? Yeah. I do. I haven't seen anything that says he's not going to be sworn in on January 20th. And if he's not, then it'll be Vance. I don't know where people get that idea that he's building real-life Avengers. He's not putting anybody qualified in there. How could all the polls be so wrong? They tried to overcompensate for how ever since Donald Trump he won in 2016, the polls had been wrong. They told us in 2016 that it was going to be an easy Hillary victory. Wrong. 2018 said it was going to be a red wave. They were wrong. 2020 said that Donald Trump was going to win and have all 3 branches of Congress. Wrong. Or all 3 branches, both chambers of Congress and the White House. Wrong. 2022 said it was going to be a red wave in the midterms. Wrong. And they tried to overcompensate for how bad they had been getting it wrong, and they went the wrong direction. Apple user says, will the Democratic politicians be okay, or will Trump be able to jail them? He might try. Depends on who he gets in the DOJ. I don't know if he can directly fire anybody, or if he, because of contracts, things like that. I don't entirely know what he can do with the uh, generals. Do I see anything good coming out of this Trump election? Not during his term. Not during his term. I think the good things that are going to come out of the Trump election are going to be things that happen after. Wouldn't surprise me if, because of Donald Trump getting uh, elected, if you don't see after his term, or if the Democrats get a sizable majority in the midterms, that they try to pass a constitutional amendment or start working on an amendment to modify the rules about who can run. Like, you're not eligible to run if you are under criminal indictment. Um, things like that. Or if you, maybe they change it, they constitutionally change it so felons can't run. Something like that. I think there's going to be some big changes coming because of Donald Trump, and they are going to be changing that. About the mainstream media, no, they. I don't think they've been compromised. They are who they always are, and they only care about money. And they were more concerned about themselves making money with this election and their coverage of it than they were doing, telling us the actual news. What are the odds of him getting more appointments in SCOTUS? I don't know. It was either Alito or Thomas said they're not going anywhere. So that was one out. Maybe if something happens to Sotomayor, I know she's having some health issues. They're worried about whether or not she'd make it 4 more years. So there's that. John Roberts may again. I don't know if any of them are going to resign, unless they have something on them to resign. He can't force them out, and I don't know if they try to pack the court. So I just don't think they're going to try it because they know their time is going to be limited. And in 4 years, there's a good chance a Democrat is sitting in the White House with a Democratic-controlled Senate and House. And if they try packing the court or expanding the court, Democrats do the same. And the one thing that's keeping us from doing it up till now is going to be the one thing that'll prevent them from doing it. We hope he doesn't get any more picks. He's already had 3. Do you think there are a lot of aliens in the country? What do you mean? Candidate for president should take a psychological test and a criminal background check. Wouldn't be a bad idea. I mean, prior to Donald Trump, the Republicans never would have put somebody like Trump up as a candidate. Normal Republicans, Reagan Republicans, wouldn't have put him in through before he got popular. More coming through the border now than before with Trump. I saw some numbers. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it's actually down. Deegan says, how about impeaching Clarence Thomas? And I'm assuming you mean Alito for ethics violations. Problem is, no time. New Congress starts January 3rd. And Democrats don't have the House of Representatives. They were trying to impeach him, but that's never going to make it to the floor for a vote. And, it's just not going to happen. It could happen in 4 years. It could happen. It won't happen during the midterms if the Democrats get control of Congress in the midterms because they don't want to give Donald Trump the pick. Could happen in 4. Let's see. I'll probably be wrapping up sometime soon here. Um, but they can't force anybody out of the Supreme Court without impeaching and removing them. And if the Republicans tried it, we have never successfully impeached or removed a Supreme Court justice. If the Republicans tried to remove them, that would be interesting. Democrats might go along. Deegan says, do you think term limits for Supreme Court will ever hold? It would if they pass a constitutional amendment. Do you think Trump's is once in a lifetime? Are we forever changed as a country and we get more? I think he's an interesting case. He's different. He fell ass backwards into the presidency the first time. I don't think he ever intended to win the presidency in 2016. For those of you that are leaving, FYI, this will be up over on my YouTube page, Analytical Iowan on YouTube. I do record all my lives. I post them up over there, however long it takes YouTube to load. So this will be up probably sometime late tonight, tomorrow. If you missed part of it, or you do miss me being live at some point, you can catch me out over there. I put all of it up there. What was I saying? Oh, about Trump. He fell ass backwards into the presidency because I don't think he intended to win. He wanted to run. He wanted to raise some money, get beat, and pocket the money he raised. Well, the field was so spread out, he was getting about 30%, but he was winning the majority because the field was so spread, and he just kept racking in nominees at all the in all the primaries. All of a sudden, he's this unbeatable force, and he fell ass backwards into the nomination. And how do you prepare for somebody like that? And because he was a barnstormer, Republicans were scared, and they didn't like Hillary, so they said, this guy looks like he could potentially do us some good here. And they ran with it because he was popular, and the mainstream media wasn't covering him like the joke he was. They gave him some credibility. They made him into a credible person. Question is, with Trump taking people into his cabinet from senators in the House, do we vote on those seats? It depends. As far as the Senate, every state has their own rules as to how that works. Some states can appoint a permanent person to fill in the vacancy. Others, there will be a special election. Like somebody will get appointed temporarily, and then there will be a special election like during the midterms to fill that seat. And other states, there's just going to be a special election for senator. It just depends. For the House, there will be a special election. And special elections get weird because you never know how a special election could go. The turnout is always weird because they're never typically in November. It's rare that they end up landing on the normal election Tuesday in November. Um, and depending on, like, especially if control of the house is going to be up for grabs, that changes fundraising, that changes PAC movements. No idea how those special elections could go. Do I think there'll be a blue wave in 2 years? I mean, I thought there was going to be a blue wave this year. But I do. I think there will be a blue wave unless some weird thing happens that nobody could see coming, and all of these policies that all of the economists and all of the experts are saying would cause things to become more expensive actually work the way Donald Trump says they would and end up fixing the economy. But when all of the experts, or the majority of the experts, are saying it's not going to work, it's going to make things more expensive, and companies are saying, hey, we're scared it's going to make things more expensive and making moves already, if it goes as bad as it is, this could be similar to what happened in 1929 when the stock market crashed. After the stock market crashed under Republican control, for 20 years, Democrats held the presidency and both houses of Congress, with the exception of 2 years under Truman, which would have been 16 years later. It was 16 years Democrats were in complete control because of the backlash. But it was also because they got stuff done for the everyday person. And if the Democrats can do that again, especially if this goes sideways, um, you know, it's entirely possible. You don't understand why Trump thinks it's a good thing? Because he doesn't understand what the term means. He really doesn't understand how tariffs work. He's not as smart as he himself thinks he is, or other people have told him he is. He believes that when you put a tariff on another country, that is exactly how it works. That you put the tariff on, that country pays it, and the money just appears. That it doesn't get tacked on. Even if it worked the way he thought, and you said, okay, I'm putting a 20% tariff on everything coming from China, and China paid for it, um, then if that worked the way that he said, you would have to also assume that those companies wouldn't just still pass the bill on to American consumers, which they will. No company is going to take a loss. They just don't. If they can find a way to pass the any sort of an extra expense on to another, just to either to another company or another consumer or to somebody else, they will. The only time they take a loss is if it's going to save them in taxes. And even then even then that turns them into a win because they save on taxes. One more question, please. Do you think second generation Mexican Americans have something to worry about? You're talking about people with birthright citizenship? No, I don't think they have anything to worry about. It would take something through Congress. It would take a constitutional amendment. He's going to try. It'll get held up in the courts. It'll get tossed. Unless something goes to the Supreme Court and they change their ruling on what the words of the 14th Amendment mean, there's nothing to worry about. Because as it sits, the 14th Amendment says, any person born in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction is an American citizen. So second generation citizens born on American soil are subject to their jurisdiction. And if they try to make some kind of a weird ruling on that, then you start running into, well, I wasn't born, if I'm not subject to their jurisdiction, I'm not subject to their laws. It becomes an entire mess. I don't see the Supreme Court doing anything to overturn that. And they would have to pass an amendment to change how that's worded, and they don't have the votes. They don't have 2/3 of both houses, and they don't have 38 states to back them. It won't happen. He's going to try something with an executive order. Uh, and it'll get tossed in the courts. Deegan asks, "Are you really in your scholarly mind that everything is definitely over for us and Trump is it?" It's not that I believe. How do I want to put this? Let me phrase this very carefully. If I see anything that shows me something to believe that there's a chance, then I would go with it. And there are some people who have said this could happen, that could happen. Until I see it, I have to assume Trump is going to be the president, because that's what the facts as we see them right now is saying. He won the election as it sits right now. Now, if something changes and there is a reason for the outcome to be in jeopardy through a court case or through something happening somewhere else, then the evidence has changed, and that would tell me, okay, then we're going to go with that outcome. But until I see that, I have to assume that everything is the way it appears right now, and Trump is going to be the president. So, okay, well, I'm going to wrap this up. I do appreciate everybody who took the time to sit and chat with me tonight. As I said earlier, just a little bit ago, this has been recorded. It will be up over on my YouTube page, Analytical Iowan on YouTube. I do put up all my lives. I'm going to probably do more, especially right now. The news is kind of hit or miss, and I do enjoy just discussing everything that um, can be out there. Deegan asks how to follow you. My two main spots are here and over on my YouTube page, um, Analytical Iowan on YouTube. Those are the two main spots where I post all my content. The only other place that I occasionally am is over as a guest on the Rational Boomer podcast. And when I do guest on that podcast, I almost always make a video that day saying, hey, I'm on the podcast again, go check it out. And that's the other place you can find me. I do have a link to my YouTube page in my bio. Um, and I do have on my YouTube page as well, not just all my TikToks, all my lives. I also have some what I call government answers, a playlist over there where if I see people are really struggling with how certain things work, I have made a video about how at least I understand that something works and the way that process goes. Trying to just clarify some things, because civics and politics are weird, and I know they're not everybody's strong suit. So appreciate everybody who took the time to join the live. I will catch you guys later. All right. So for those of you catching up over here on YouTube, it was a great night. Had a great live again. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you the next time I go live.